Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for the good health and well-being this board has experienced so far this year, and pray you continue to watch over us as we continue serving our community. We also ask that you grant our citizens peace, prosperity, and well-being in their lives. Please instill in us the necessary integrity, perseverance, and wisdom to successfully work together for the greater good and benefit of our individual districts and Spotsylvania County. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Sabula?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to table item number 4 under presentations and reports to next meeting.
Any comment or questions? What is it? It's the animal shelter.
Animal shelter.
And that's the animal shelter. Call the question.
Seven yes.
Next item, Mr. Chairman and board members, is your consent agenda. Today's consent agenda consists of the following. Item 2 is the approval of board meeting minutes for September 27, 2016. Item 3, acceptance of a grant award and budget amendment for FY17 Virginia Department of Fire Programs grant for the regional burn building. It's a grant of $7,795 that'll require a input of $1,375 from FREM funds. Item 4 is acceptance of a budget amendment for the FY17 Virginia State Police Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. This is a subaward for our Sheriff's Office, $12,000 that will pay for overtime and some educational outreach. Item 5 is the approval of a budget adjustment for FY17 Congestion and Mitigation of Air Quality Incentive Program. This is for the conversion of 5 of our sheriff's vehicles to propane. There is no local match, and that's a grant of $31,695. Number 6 is approval of a budget adjustment for allocating reserved fire and rescue project funding to emissions extraction systems. This shifts money that's already in the FREM capital projects budget to balance budgets for the completion of emissions extraction systems for our stations that lack such systems. Item 7 is capital project budget amendment. This is a series of amendments to balance the capital projects budgets from the past year. It has a net positive of $49,022 in the General Capital Projects Fund and $2,402 positive in the Utilities Capital Projects Fund. Item 8 is acceptance of a grant award and budget adjustment for the National Association of Drug Diversion Investigators, Inc. for our Sheriff's Office. This also has no local match. It's a grant of $5,000 for prescription drug abuse efforts. Item 9 is a series of recommended human resources policy revisions to chapters 4, 5, 8, 10, 11, 12, 17, 18, and 20 of our HR policies. They cover a variety of subject matters, touching up policies in small ways, all of which were detailed in your agenda packet. And item 10 is setting aside the date for the 2017 Stars and Stripes on July 1st, 2017, which is, as per custom, the Saturday before the 4th of July. That is your consent agenda.
Would anybody like to pull any items from consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull number 9.
Number 9? Any others? And number 6. Do I have a motion on the remaining?
So moved.
Call the question.
Seven yes.
Back in order, item number 6 that was pulled is a budget adjustment for allocating reserved fire and rescue project funds to pay for emissions extraction systems in our fire stations that lack such systems.
Yeah, the question, just clarification. Chief, you might as well keep coming. Just really want to know, does this fund all of the stations?
Very easy, positive answer tonight. As you know, we got the ATL grants, Assistance to Firefighter grants, and it would only cover those stations that were built before a certain date. This actually adds to the grant funding to do the rest, so the answer would be yes, sir.
And that's good, because I know that's been one of the biggest concerns of our firefighters, so I appreciate that, Chief.
And we were able to do that really by getting a lot of good prices, a lot of competitive bidding on apparatus and equipment that we've done, and so for leftover for some other projects where we were able to allow the vendors to sweeten the deal from some other previous projects.
Well, that's good. So now we can work on the turnout gear next, but,
Yes, sir.
all right, appreciate it, Chief.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Motion to approve? Call the question.
Seven, yes.
Next pulled item was item 9, which are the revisions to the HR policies.
Yes, I want to call your attention to the revisions to Chapter 8, which are the third tab down in your agenda package. Under Chapter 8.12, use of tobacco products, the amendment would add electronic cigarette, vaporizer, or any other use of tobacco or alternative tobacco product to include chewing. And the next sentence reads, nicotine gum or patches used for tobacco cessation purposes are not prohibited. And that second sentence I agree with. However, my feeling is that electronic cigarettes are also tobacco cessation products. I would propose removing the reference to electronic cigarettes and vaporizers and removing the words or alternative tobacco.
Do we have any comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
Move for approval with that change.
Mr. Ross?
Is Rose here? So I have a question about what the Virginia Human Rights Act is when it was passed. A lot of these things are saying you need to do it to be in compliance with the Virginia Human Rights Act.
The Virginia Human Rights Act actually is part of the code, and it covers all of the EEO categories that are protected classes. I couldn't tell you exactly when it was passed, but it actually details all the protected classes that you see in the policy.
Well, I mean, we've had a policy for quite some time. Why now for the changes? I'm assuming, I don't know, do you know when it passed?
I think in its current form, it probably passed something like 20 or 30 years ago. However, there's been different court decisions and so forth that kind of expanded what it includes and so forth. Also, the changes, the amendments, there were things in the old policy that were not in the Virginia code. And so to be consistent, we just made it, and there's questions whether or not a locality has the authority to create a protected class that is not specified in the Code of Virginia. And so to avoid that whole thing, we just pulled the language straight out of the Code of Virginia to put into the policy so that they line up.
Could you review Chapter 12? I'm just, as I read it, revise husband, wife, and marriage terminology to include non-married or unmarried and same-gender parents. What exactly is that?
Well, in the FMLA, it requires us to provide protection for parents for the birth or fostering or adoption of a child. And our policy details husband and wife, and that actually doesn't actually cover every type of parent. yet that protection is available and required under federal law. And so to make it more inclusive and appropriate for what federal law requires, which is that all parents be given the right to have FMLA, we've removed husband and wife. Because we do have parents that are both unmarried and in some cases are not a husband and wife.
So when we say we've revised husband, wife, and marriage terminology, it just seems to include unmarried. So is the
Well, it could be
is the
unmarried
married
or
terminology now include unmarried?
Well, no, we just removed that marriage language. So it's both, it could be same gender married or it could be unmarried parents.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Benton?
On the vapor, the cigarettes that we just discussed, if we take that clause out, does that allow any employee to utilize those items?
I would think so. If it's not prohibited, then we would be saying that it would be permissible for them to do that during work hours.
Be up for a friendly amendment to where we, well, how about where we say we prohibit it unless utilized in a cessation program? Because I know we do, I think we just did a program through the fire department where to help an individual. He didn't use the vape stuff, but
How would that be defined? Would someone just have to say that they're working their way off tobacco, or?
I would think so, yeah. I know that we do testing for it for.
Yes, and we do
nicotine.
have an employee assistance program that provides smoke cessation. So perhaps one option would be to require participation in that program to show that you're actively pursuing tobacco cessation. And that's free to employees. So,
I would accept that amendment.
Any other comments or questions?
Just
Mr.
clarification.
Yakimowski?
Then do we pay for vaping equipment? I don't vape, so I don't know what you would call it.
no, we do not.
But if we categorize it as that, is that going to open it up to?
I'm not aware of any smoke cessation program that includes e-cigarettes or vaping, so I would think not. That's not to say that people don't use it for that purpose, but I would believe that our employee assistance program, smoke cessation program, would not offer that.
Okay.
So that may be contradictory to what Mr. Ben's asking for. If the requirement, if the friendly amendment is to do it within a cessation program, yet the cessation program does not allow for the vapors, the vaporizers or smokeless electronic cigarettes, I don't think that's what Mr. Trampy is going for. I think his idea is to allow those in his motion. So I think that might be contradictory, Mr. Benton, to include that based on what Rose is saying.
Clarify, Dr. Trampy, is that what you're wanting to allow the employees to do that?
Yes. With their own equipment. I don't want the county to buy it for them.
And I'm just to be clear, Mr. Trampy, on your motion, yours is to remove the electronic cigarette and vaporizer, but still chewing would be prohibited. Okay.
How about this friendly amendment? How about they have to do a declaration of nicotine cessation.
Cessation.
So, thank you. That way they can do it instead of opening up to every employee to use this stuff, which I think there's been questions about those vapors and what they're putting into it also. Perfumed and flavored and all this stuff. Before we open up the can of worms, can we say that since the employees aren't supposed to be using nicotine anyway, we make it to where they have to do either a cessation program where it's prescribed, or they do a declaration where they're trying to stop their smoking and.
Kind of on the honor system.
Yeah.
So I'm just throw out. The chief had something to ask.
Can I make one
Yes.
comment, please? From research that we're starting to see in the fire service because of prohibitions against tobacco products in the workplace, There are some researchers that say that basically we don't know today where this product is even going to take us, and some people are going out as far on a limb to say in the future that inhaling products of this alternative product, as Mr. Benton just was mentioning, could be more harmful to people around it than current cigarette smoke. And I would just throw that, I'm not a specialist, I don't have any actual data to give you tonight, but I'm seeing a lot more and more of questioning of the use of those products and the potential detriment to those people that are around
Right.
them.
So let me, so this is a lot of questions. I don't think anybody anticipated these questions on that. So this may be something we table and we come back and potentially we get some more data and information whether or not this is even, which direction we should go.
I'm
Mr.
Well,
Trampy, it's,
I would say, too, you may want to consider the productivity implications if we allow for e-cigarettes and vaping at work.
all right, so that's another great, I'm glad you signed up for that,
But
putting
do
that
we-
information together. So,
Do we have
So-
employees who go outside to smoke cigarettes, though? And that's a bigger productivity issue, I would think.
Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that would be organizational benefit. If the sole issue has to do with the use of tobacco products, I would respectfully invite the board to consider tabling the issues relating to policies regarding tobacco products. If the board is disposed to make a motion on the balance of the policy changes, there would be organizational benefit to having those enacted and in place, and we can bring back a report in greater depth on tobacco use and that policy.
Let me make sure before we go down this path. So these are internal, we don't have to have a public hearing.
That is correct.
Okay,
Mr.
so we
Chairman.
can
These
make
are-
the change all but the tobacco products.
fine
So
with me.
maybe, would you like to amend your motion?
Yeah, I move for approval of everything except for the section in 8.12.
To be clear, I think Mr. Benton has to remove, you have to agree to rescind your motion?
Oh, I'll rescind my motion.
Okay. And then, so the motion on the table is to approve the HR amendments without including tobacco products. Is that correct? Any other comments or questions? The changes.
That's right. Everything but the changes to 8.12 related to tobacco.
Okay. All right. Call the question.
Six yes, with Mr. Ross voting no.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That brings us to public presentations for this afternoon. Amy, do we have anyone signed up for public presentations?
Yes, sir.
Let me go through the guidelines briefly for public presentations. Public presentations are an opportunity for citizens to present matters that you believe deserve the board's attention. These presentations are not part of a public hearing. Sign up to speak at each public hearing is separate. Public presentations are one-way comments from citizens to the Board of Supervisors. They are not a forum for dialogue or debate. To make a public presentation, please sign up on the provided sign-up sheet and please print clearly. Come to the lectern when your name is called. State clearly your name, address, and voting district for our record. Address your comments directly to the board. State whether you are speaking on your own behalf, in which case you'll have 3 minutes to speak, or on behalf of a group, in which case you will have 5 minutes to speak. Notice a yellow light will come on when you have 30 seconds to wrap up, and a red light will come on when you're expected to stop, and your microphone will be turned off. Public presentations shall not be used to address matters subject to public hearings or to make political campaign speeches, private advertisements, or personal attacks. And as always, written comments are invited and are welcomed by the Board of Supervisors. Amy, who has signed up?
Frank Bratterson.
Good evening, or good afternoon, I guess it is this time. Frank Broderson, 5320 West Philippi Place, Battlefield District, on behalf of Virginia Heritage residents.
We have the floor
May I have the
computer,
floor
please?
computer?
Yeah, there is a presentation.
Thank
The
you.
presentation has been reviewed for appropriateness by staff per county policy.
Ready? Okay. We are here today to request relief from a unique financial obligation. Ron is going to advance it. There we go. Lees Park was approved in 2002 contingent upon the construction of 2 miles of Spotsylvania Parkway. Spotsylvania specified the 220-foot right-of-way, the medians, the borders, the water feature, all to be landscaped using a minimum of 400 trees. 3 years later, in 2005, VDOT notified the county, we do not maintain landscaping. The developer built the parkway, pricing all construction costs and additional proffers, cash and in kind, into his lot prices that we paid. We paid for the parkway, the landscaping, as well as all of our impact on the county's capital facilities. Parkway has become an important component of Spotsylvania's roadways, and it is designed to handle both current and future growth. Ron, you're ahead of me. There we go. This was taken last Thursday at about 11 o'clock in the morning. To solve the landscaping maintenance issue, the developers in 2005 created and recorded an easement and cost-sharing agreement. There were no residents, just the developer. An easement grants a right to use or cross property. This is an obligation, a requirement to pay. It is not an easement. Commercial properties do not pay, just the homeowners. As you can see, Virginia Heritage pays 35% of the costs of the annual landscape maintenance and beautification. Virginia Heritage saves the county substantial funds by doing our own snow removal, internal street repair, and replacement. In pursuing relief, we've talked with numerous public officials and private attorneys. Significantly, we learned of a 2012 amendment to statutes found at 55-509.1:1. Developers can no longer financially obligate future buyers for more than 5 years. Our type of financial burden is now limited. However, Lees Park and Virginia Heritage have already paid for 10 years. Plus, 55-509 was not made retroactive. Additionally, disputes or disclosures of financial obligations is not currently required. To accomplish that, 2 statutes would have to be amended. We've repaid the developer and have paid maintenance for 10 years, a total of $2.4 million to date. Annually, we save Spotsylvania County $213,300 for a parkway whose users all benefit. We have paid for parkway construction, for annual landscape maintenance, and still provide net income to Spotsylvania. Will we continue to be financially punished for investing in Spotsylvania County? We request relief. Virginia Heritage internally funding street-related expenses more than compensates for our share of landscape maintenance expenses. You have the power to correct this unfair, unethical, and onerous financial burden. We request you discuss the available options and initiate action. We're delighted to have today our delegate Bobby Orrick, who is assisting us on a state level. We hope you will support his efforts as well, but we request you independently pursue an immediate solution. Thank you.
There are no other citizens signed up to speak.
Would anybody like to speak that did not sign up to speak?
Mary Lou Collier, Mr. Skinner's district. Recently, I attended the Station 11, Fire and Rescue Station 11 watering down ceremony, and I was very impressed with the tour of the building. As a citizen in that area, I'm very relieved after 7 years of waiting for a fire and rescue building in that area to be built and be used is a relief. If you're aware, on Mine Road, there is a freight train that comes through during the day, and it can be anywhere from 15 minutes duration. So with this station located the way it is, we can get fire and rescue services and not be impacted by the train holding up traffic on Mine Road. I was impressed with the increased quality of the training of the personnel. I am pleased with the direction of the Fred Chief and how he has progressed. And I will say that he was one that was cooking hot dogs. He is a man of word, and he's also a man of action. He does the walk with the talk, and we're really blessed to have him as the chief for the fire rescue. Although I will say I was a little bit dismayed that our Virginia governor couldn't come and be present while he was just a couple of miles down the road having a sip of beer at a winery, beer brewery that just opened. But anyway, he could have also marveled at the new train station if he had come. Two, I don't know whether it's the state, county, homeowner, whoever, but I'm really concerned about the overgrowth of limbs and trees on the major roadways. We've had people hurt in other areas, and it's just a matter of time that somebody's going to be fatally or hurt badly. I just wish that somebody would take action and review these major roads. The trees, some of them look like they're about ready to fall on the roads. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Bobby Orrock, former resident of the county and resident of Caroline County now, but speaking this afternoon on behalf of the Heritage Village folks to add a little further information to their presentation. The long and the short of the issue they're dealing with is that a proffer that was tendered back in 22 thereabouts to the county, perfectly legally executed and received on the part of the county, had one particular provision in that the developer offered, and that being the perpetual maintenance of that right-of-way or that roadway that the developer agreed to build. What the county was not aware of, to my knowledge, when they agreed to that proffer condition, was that the developer intended to put that into the homeowner association requirements, i.e. the developer was never going to pay a penny of the maintenance that he was pledging forever. The legislature in 2012 recognized the potential damage that could be done to a property owner under those circumstances, and we changed the law so that no developer could prospectively create such a circumstance as what the individuals in Heritage Village are dealing with. The dilemma we're faced with at the state level, and talking with folks at the Attorney General's office and Legislative Services, we do not know of any legislative remedy for their circumstance, because at the end of the day, it is a contract agreement that was entered into between the county and the developer, and that these individuals became party to when they signed the homeowner association covenants that were some 50 pages in length and vaguely made reference to common areas that they were accepting responsibility for maintenance of. It is my intention in this coming session to work to, again, prospectively make clear that homeowner association provisions in the future will have to be provided in a consumer-friendly manner where that they can understand what they're agreeing to. But unfortunately, for the citizens you heard earlier representing that group, the only relief that I can see would be for the county to go forward in initiating a new proffer agreement, a new contract, as it were, for their community with the current homeowner association. I would just share that as a means of enlightenment to the board and would assist in any manner with the homeowners or the board that I may in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Would anybody else like to speak that did not sign up? Okay, seeing none?
Mr. Chairman, if I may speak to the issue real quick. Thank you. Two things. First of all, I would ask that staff take a look at the issue and bring it back on an agenda item so that the entire board can be brought up to speed about what the issue is and all of the related topics. Also, to ask that this be put on our October 19th regional elected officials dinner agenda so that we could potentially get the backing of our surrounding counties and neighbors to support us in an endeavor. What that endeavor looks like, I'm not sure, but we will work with our delegates and senators to come up with something, hopefully, but really to come up with ideas of what can be done. Because at this point, I think we're just starting out and just trying to figure out what can be done, because basically somebody has to take over the maintenance of the landscaping, and currently it's the residents. And so if that's not done, then it has to be paid for somehow, and I'm assuming VDOT doesn't want that responsibility because they didn't want to take it back in 2005. So if that can be brought back at the earliest possible meeting, perhaps the beginning of November, I would certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, on that as well, can you also identify any of the other subdivisions or HOAs that may have the same issue in the county?
We'll certainly look for it, Mr. Chairman. Virginia Heritage, or the Lease Park development, is the only one that I am aware of offhand or that I have heard of in being subject to this sort of requirement.
Okay.
But we'll take a look.
All right.
And that does bring us, speaking of VDOT, that does bring us to the VDOT report, and Sean Nelson is here with us.
Your October briefing for transportation. First, I'll start with the Battlefield District. The Smith Station intersection with Route 208 improvements are actually finished, so that project is wrapping up right now. The fixed completion date was today. They've pretty much moved everything out. There's a few punch list items, but the project is substantially complete. In the Berkeley District, Mr. Sabula, I got an update for you on the Fairview Road Bridge rehab. That project is slated to start on November 28th, at which time we'll be detouring traffic. The drainage improvements have been made to address the citizens' concerns already. On some of the preliminary engineering projects, the Route 658 Mount Olive Road Bridge Replacement Project, which borders between Spotsylvania and Hanover County. The public hearing was held on October 6th, which was last week. We had a pretty decent turnout. That project is slated for add in 2017 or maybe early 2018. There was one inquiry that we had, and that was a request to review the intersection of Marie Road and Stanfield Road. We recently did some drainage work there, which caused a deep drop-off. We're going to have that section actually restriped within the next couple of weeks to let people know where the edge of the road is. In the Cortland District, Mr. Ross, you had asked us to look at the signals on Route 3 at Salem Church Road, going up to Caldy Silver on the weekends. There was an issue with some of the detection at the Salem Church signal. That has been reviewed, and I think they've already rectified the issue. In the Lee Hill District, Mr. Skinner, the Spotsylvania Avenue and Mine Road project is ongoing right now. They're doing some paving work this week. As that project continues, I'll be providing you updates weekly on what we've got going on in that area. There was an inquiry request for us to look at the signs along I-95 northbound at the exit to Route 1 North. Those signs should be put up within the next month. In the Livingston District, Mr. Benton, we've got the Grand Brooks Rural Rustic project that's going on that actually started the full depth reclamation last week. I was out there 2 days. We're going to have a project tour on Thursday. We're really excited about this and think that the citizens, I've talked to a couple of them out there, and they're pretty excited too. That road should be totally resurfaced and completed by November 7th. Williams Lane and Haley's Mill, the drainage work on those projects are ongoing, and we're hoping to have those hard surfaces before the winter gets here. We had some inquiries for you. You requested us look at the signs at Courthouse and Massey Road to kind of adjust those to avoid some of the conflicts there. That work has been done. There was also a request from a citizen to do some patching along Massey Road, and that work was done last week. Those are kind of all my updates for the board members. I've also sent you all a package that has detailed information of other projects that I may not have gone here. This is some of the roadway maintenance that was planned for this year that is pretty much ongoing. We finished a majority of it now, except for a few punch list items. Okay.
Mr. Sabula.
Yeah, Mr. Nelson, I just wanted to get this on, quote, an official agenda, if you will, and that was to bring to surface the discussion we had concerning the emergency access to Route 1 for Station 8. Currently, this is pretty much can be an untenable situation that's resulted as a result of the improvements made to Route 1 and Mud Tavern Road. And I know you and I and the Deputy Chief spoke to this, but I'd just like to bring this to official attention so that we can move out and get that light and get it installed. And I know that you said that VDOT could pick up 50%, and we would have to pick up 50%. So I want the rest of the board members to know this is a budget item that needs to be done from a public safety standpoint. And thank you for the discussion.
Mr. Ross?
Hey, Sean, so there's a homeowners association off of River Road that they have a private road, and they're interested in seeing what it would take to get the private road up to standards for VDOT, for the state to take it over. Okay. So that's Mott's Run Road that goes into Country Way Circle and also Misty Way. And it's all accessible through Mott's Run Road that's off of River Road.
Okay.
I don't know the process of doing that, but if you could get with me, but they're interested to find out how much it would cost to do any kind of road improvements, if any. It's a pretty decent road to become a state-maintained road.
Okay, we'll
Thank
look
you.
into that.
Mr. Skinner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to follow up on Mr. Sabula's comment about Station 8. Obviously, the improvement in the road system there is wonderful, but because it was pushed back so much in the building on the southern side of it, I experienced this at the 20th anniversary of the celebration there. For the other board members, if you take a look out there, if you got time, it's very hard to see any traffic coming from the south going to the north, and I truly believe that what we need there is that light that they can automatically switch on. And we need to do that as soon as possible. It'd be terrible to take one of these new pieces of equipment we put out there. It's very difficult to see and move out. There's no signage for people coming up there whatsoever. And we really, really have to set that as a high priority. I'd like to see that too. And if board members take a look out there, you'll see how dangerous it really is. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the board will recall that this year the county received its first AAA bond rating. And we have this evening a report. Courtney Rogers and David Rose from Davenport, our financial advisors, are here with a review of the 2016 bond sale and rating agency reports.
Board computer, please. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My colleague David Rose and I have been fortunate to work for the county going back, David, for 25 years, myself 20 years now. And we are happy to say that the long road to AAA, we congratulate you all for getting there with Fitch this go around. But also we got upgraded by Moody's to AA1. And what we'd like to do is kind of give you a little bit of background, some of their comments, what they've said, give you a little bit of an impact that we see in the marketplace, and actually show you how you fared with this recent bond sale versus just last year, for instance. The bond sale we just had was basically a 20-year issue. There was no refinancings this time. It basically, we ended up with a 155, so under 2% interest costs, the lowest in the county's history. We had 7 different firms that competitively bid on this. This is all done electronically on the internet. And these bonds were won by SunTrust Robinson Humphrey. Look at the credit rating history. You can see there at the top with Fitch. We started out with an initial rating back in 2005, basically 11 years ago at a AA minus, the bottom of the AA category. Now at AAA, stable outlook. Moody's, we started out way back in 1978 with an A3, upgraded into the AA category in 2004, and now here a dozen plus years, upgraded to a AA1. They don't have outlooks unless you're negative or positive, so at this point there's no outlook there. With Standard & Poor's, AA plus with a stable outlook, again, also back 1978, started out in the A with an A rating. AA minus back in 2001 got us in the AA category, and now here, basically 2010, about 9 years later, we were upgraded. So it's been about 6 years since we upgraded. And kind of jumping to the end of our closing comments, that's where we see the possibility of the next upgrade, if you will. With the timing of Moody's, once they make an upgrade or a move like this, they tend to like to see a little bit of time before they might look at maybe moving you up to the next level. So really, S&P is the one we'll focus on the next several years. On page 3, some of the advantages of a AAA. Obviously, it gives you access to the lowest interest rates that are out there in the marketplace. Over time, this can save the county millions of dollars. We'll talk about that in just a moment. It does place the county in an elite category of counties nationwide. We'll show you some of the numbers here in just a second. And it's hard to put a value on this, but when it comes to economic development prospects, they recognize that a AAA-rated entity are the best run localities out there. There's a lot of positive qualities out there that they see in these counties. And so that's something that in and of itself is going to carry some value that's hard to put an exact dollar amount on. On page 4, we thought it might be good to show you, when you look at Fitch's universe of ratings, there's 380 counties that they rate nationwide for geo credits. So with your upgrade, basically you're one of 79. And actually, since we put this chart together and sent it to the county last week, our neighbors to the north there in Stafford, we understand, seeing the news that they've been upgraded. So really, it's now 80. But essentially, you're at the top. You're in the top 10%, and even lower than that nationwide. So when you look at Moody's, there's about 915 county geo credits out there. There's 93 that are rated AAA. There are 112 that are AA1. So if you look at it from where we were in the AA2 category, we were in the top 50%. We've jumped now, we're in the top quartile, basically, of counties that are rated by Moody's. And you can see they actually issue many more credits than even Fitch does. So you might ask, well, what does that mean to us in terms of dollars? When you look at where credit spreads have been going back to 2003, you can see they were pretty flat up until the credit crisis, and then they've jumped up. Between a AAA and a AA, we're looking at basically 1/4%. Now, what does that translate into in terms of dollars? If you look at your current portfolio, which is just shy of $300 million of debt outstanding, if we were able to save that when we were issuing those debts back in those times, we'd save about $7.7 million of interest cost. Would have saved that if we were AAA rated across the board. So that's kind of what it really means. In terms of the key drivers to a credit rating, I know you've heard this from us, but wanted to point out that that with the changes that Moody's and S&P in particular have made, and Fitch more recently, they put more numerics to these. Fitch did not when they did their criteria change, but with Moody's, 30% of the rating, and S&P as well, is the economic base. Another 30% is financial performance and flexibility. Both S&P and Moody's looked at it the same way. Where they differ is that Moody's has a higher percentage, 20% on debt, and S&P only 10%, whereas S&P put 30% on management and 20% on Moody's. And the reason that's important is, again, thinking about S&P being the one that we're going to be looking at, trying to push going forward, they value that management side, and that goes into their policies, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a moment. When you look at Fitch's report, some of the things they said, basically the county had very strong growth prospects, low long-term liability burden, that's basically the debt side, but also your pension side, healthy reserves, and broad budgetary tools. So they see that you've got the tools necessary to continue being a strong AAA. And so that's one of the reasons why they moved you into that category. With S&P and Moody's, some of the comments that they had, S&P has you in a strong or very strong in all their categories. They did have one caution in terms of the debt side, wanted to make sure that we didn't jump out and get ourselves too far afield in terms of debt. We've got policies that guide us there, so we know that that's worked well for us in the past. Will continue to work for us. We just got to keep our eyes on that. And that was one of the things they did mention. They talked about the strong financial policies and practices. As you recall, this board made some changes just in the last year on those policies, and we've seen those making some dividends here, paying dividends here with both the Moody's upgrade as well as the Fitch upgrade. Now, Moody's went on to say that one of the challenges is going to be maintaining those reserves going forward, but also balancing that with that pay-go. You might remember that pay-go policy that we put in place probably 7, 8 years ago, of adding that because we had very little that we were putting in the operational side to help keep our debt burden down. That's been able to reduce the amount of debt that you've had to go out and borrow to get these capital projects moving that you've wanted to do. And that's what's helped keep that debt burden down. And that's one of the things that they'll be keeping an eye on. But it shows the importance of that policy that was put in place several years back. In the reports, S&P and Moody's talk about the things that could make the rating go up as well as go down. But looking at the positive side, what could make us go up? Really, it comes down to strong wealth and income levels. That was one of the things that S&P wrote, but also told us verbally as we talked to them on the phone. And also strong reserves, keeping those reserves very healthy. And then keeping an eye on the debt burden. That's just one of the things that we'll keep an eye on, making sure we stay within our policies. In terms of pricing comparisons, we were in the market a day after the city of Manassas. They're AA1, AAA. You'll see that we've compared very favorably with them. We showed you a Montgomery County, Maryland transaction that was about a month before us, but rated just slightly below us. And you can see the differential. What we're looking at really is the spread column. That's basically shows on an apples and apples basis. On any given day, the market moves up and down. But we have an index that we track. And when we compare ourselves to that index, it's a AAA index. You can see we were basically one off that in the early part. And then the same thing with Manassas, and you can see the higher rates with Montgomery. It might be easier to see on the next page, which is a comparison of our 2015 bond sale and our 2016 bond sale. And you can see in the brown shaded, the top shaded area there, we were in ones or -1, which basically we were right on the AAA yield curve, where we were basically about +4 to +8, depending upon which year you're looking at in terms of before we got the AAA. So that kind of shows you the differential that we got there. Yeah, as David just was saying, the lower the spread, the better. Obviously, the closer we are to that AAA index, that's the more important spread. So, in just concluding here, big picture, S&P is really looking for higher wealth and income levels and a lower debt burden. We want to keep. I know you all are looking for economic development emphasis. I know that's something you've been talking a lot about. As you get more economic development prospects in town, that's going to help with that, the higher wealth and income. And that'll help also with the budgetary dollars. And that's something we can do to keep those debt burden down, keep adding to that pay-go. I know we're going to keep growing. The priority is to try to keep growing that up to 5% as a policy going forward. That will help reduce the amount of debt we have to borrow in the future. Happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any comments,
Again,
questions?
Congratulations.
Mr. Skinner?
When you talk about the level of wealth and income, are we talking the average income for Spotsylvania? Is that what we're looking to increase?
Basically, they're looking at median household income and per capita income. Those are the two key drivers.
Is there a level that you can tell us that we need to get to? I mean, when you talk about what we are now and how much more we should.
Not off the top of my head, but what we can do is we can come back and show you comparisons on a AAA basis and a AA basis and show you what their categories are.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Benton?
Am I able to get a copy of this presentation?
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Jakubowski?
There we go. Thank you. First of all, thank you guys. Knowing that previously being on the board, I was told by one board member who's just sit to my right, the first time that I think both of you showed up was listen to these guys. They are top notch and they know exactly what they're doing. And I think that the working relationship you've had with the county and the guidance that you've given us, and then the follow through, because there is that part too. You can say these are good policies, but if you don't implement them, then it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't help. But I think that relationship that we've had is now starting to pay off. But I don't want to stop there. I want to make sure that we continue. And one thing that I had said to our finance staff, and I say to our county administrator, is what's next? I never want to be satisfied with where we are now, because it takes time to build up to the next level. And so you need to also do it incrementally so that you don't trip yourself up. And, we did it with the budget stabilization fund this past year. As opposed to putting all the cash in at once, we're going to build towards it, because the worst thing to do is to have a policy and not follow your policy. And so if you make it attainable, the better off you are. So that would be the question I would have, is how do we continue? Because there's some things that are just out of our control. When it comes to businesses locating here and incomes increasing, unless we start paying our county employees and teachers, triple their pay, and that's really not going to raise the median rate. How do we deal with the things that we can deal with, while obviously keeping an eye on the things that are out of our control, but stepping into the next programs so that we continually get better and we continually improve? Because I think that, speaking for myself, that's what I want to do.
And I appreciate your comments, Mr. Jakubowski. I would think the thing that we continue to do is to stay on the path that we're on. We're not fully AAA, as Courtney said, for all three, but we're moving in that trajectory. I think if you also continue to follow, which we do regularly. We've been here before. I maybe don't come as often because Courtney's done a tremendous job in terms of making sure you're adhering to your policies, and then we continue to tweak those policies to make them in tie with best practices, both nationwide and statewide and what have you. So I think if we continue to do that, I think what next will be, or eventually, if you want to look down the road, maybe another 5 or 10 years, is we get to that point where we're strong enough that actually these policies then build on themselves and they actually put less burden on the citizens, because there were certain decisions that were made over the last 25 years that were not easy, to making sure that certain dollars were put into fund balance and what have you. So the point is, we've got the momentum now. Continue that momentum. I think what then will be, as Courtney said earlier, is that those businesses that you want to be here, you're going to have an even better shot at getting those businesses, and it's going to make it easier, never easy, but easier for your economic development staff and the gentleman behind me and his folks to do their thing, which in turn takes the pressure off the general fund taxes that I think we all want to be mindful of. And that's sort of, I think, what I would say. Courtney, I don't know if anything you want to add to that.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we have a FY16 preliminary end-of-year financial report and recommended carryover requests from our finance director and budget manager.
Floor computer, please. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We have for you tonight the preliminary fiscal year, end-of-year fiscal year financial report. The final report will be provided in November when the audit is completed and the CAFR is finalized. We have a few slides that we hope will summarize the many details that we provided in the board package this week. So we're going to walk through those few slides, and then at the end we are going to ask for the board's approval on the carryover request. And Bonnie's going to take us through the slides.
So in this report, we're going to focus on the general fund. The other funds, other than the general fund, ended the year in a positive manner as well. But we're going to focus tonight on the general fund. And here on this slide, we're just showing the overall performance in fiscal year 18 of revenues compared to expenditures and net transfers. Revenues were $248.2 million in the general fund, and the expenditures, including net transfers, were $241.9 million. So the preliminary end-of-year performance of the general fund is a positive $6.3 million. The fund balance net of reservations at the end of fiscal year 16 is $59.9 million. When we factor out the recommended carryover that's going to be before you for your decision tonight of $4.3 million, and we factor out the potential schools carry forward, which they will bring to you at a later date, of about $500,000, that fund balance net of reservations comes down to $55.1 million. Of that $55.1 million, $44 million is the 11% fiscal stability reserve. $2 million is the budget stabilization reserve, and yes, that is reflective of the policy, the most recent policy adopted in May. The health insurance reserve policy level is $3.7 million at the end of fiscal year 16, and the economic opportunities reserve fund is replenished to that $2 million policy level. That then leaves the amount of the fund balance that is greater than the policy reserve requirements at $3.4 million. That is up $1.7 million over the $1.7 million we thought it would be when we reported to you at the close of the third quarter. How did we get to the $3.4 million? Again, we started at $1.7 million at the end of the third quarter. That was our report to you of what we thought the fund balance would be in excess of the policy requirements. Fiscal year 16 revenue actuals were up $2.7 million over where we thought they'd be. The bulk of that is in, as usual, real estate and personal property, also in delinquent personal property. And we are looking at what is causing that variance. You might remember that we added in fiscal year 17 budget, we added a factor to both the real estate and the personal property estimates to bump those numbers up by the amount that we were generally over in the last couple years. So some tweaking has already been done to the fiscal year 17 numbers to get at that, but I'm going to be working with the Treasurer's Office in the next week or so to figure out how can we further try to close that gap between where our revenue actually ends up being and what we're projecting. So we're going to be looking at that in the next couple days. The fiscal year 16 expenditure savings, and this is net of carryover, was $3.2 million. The bulk of that is in turnover. Turnover of personnel related to health insurance, the savings is $1.4 million. You might recall that as we go through the course of the year, we don't alter or make any further projections on what we think health insurance claims and costs are going to be. We assume that the budgeted number is going to be what the actuals are, because it's not a 1/12 expenditure each month. It's, whatever our claims are in a given month, that's what our expenses are. And so we don't make projections about what that might be, what those might be from month to month. Another $400,000 was just in regular turnover of personnel, or maybe the benefits that those personnel were choosing. And about $700,000 was in information services savings and management consulting and maintenance service contract costs. Also in DSS and CSA, because there's a match there of revenues and expenditures, we tend to report on these programs as the net effect. And the net effect to fiscal year 16 is a $0.4 million decrease to the fund balance. Revenues were $0.2 million less than projected, and expenditures were $0.2 million more than projected, netting that $400,000 reduction to the fund balance. Changes in reservations is a decrease of $3.9 million to the fund balance. And I hit on this a little bit earlier. That's $2 million to replenish the Economic Opportunities Reserve per the policy. It's also a change of $1 million added to the assessment challenge contingency based on potential current liabilities. And you might recall from a few years ago, there are a few taxpayers, large taxpayers, who are challenging their assessments. Also, we have to reserve the transient occupancy revenue that is not used in the prior fiscal year. That can be allocated to tourism, and that's a legal requirement that we can only use a certain portion of transient occupancy for tourism. Also, $800,000 to repay the utilities fund for Company 5 water line installation. That's what makes up the $3.9 million change in reservations. And then we have a change in fiscal year 17 budgeted use of the fund balance of about $40,000, which rounds up to the 0.1 that's there. And that is the reduction in incentives that the board took action on September 13th. All of those changes added to the $1.7 million that we told you we thought the fund balance would be in excess of the policy requirements at third quarter, is what brings us to the $3.4 million in fund balance that exists now. In terms of the carryover process, the process did not change much at all from previous year's process. Basically, departments are asked to submit carryover requests for unexpended funding from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 17. The carryover requests are not meant to create a contingency within a department budget for the fiscal year 17 budget, and therefore requests must be for specific goods, services, or equipment acquisitions. Going further, we have even further criteria. The carryover requests must meet at least one of the following criteria. It must be an expenditure approved in the fiscal year 16 budget and obligated but not yet expended at the close of fiscal year 16. It must be an unexpended grant funding or otherwise restricted in some way. It must be an expenditure directly related to a Board of Supervisors or county administrator proposal. It must be a request to address a safety or operational issue, or it must be a one-time expenditure approved in fiscal year 16 but not expended before June 30th. This slide is meant to summarize the recommended carryover requests that are before you tonight for decision. Most of the, or $2 million of the requests are in the grant/restricted funding category. Those must be carried over. We can only use that money for certain purposes. So that is being requested. That's 42.4% of the total carryover. There's $1,950,000 in obligated but not expended before the end of the fiscal year. $800,000 of that is for incentives that were approved by the board but not yet expended. Safety and operational issues are $407,000. Approved but not expended before the close of the fiscal year is $317,000. And then Board of Supervisor or county admin proposals is $50,000. The total of all funds carryover is $4.7 million. And that is below the threshold required for a public hearing. Therefore, a public hearing is not required to adjust the budget should you choose to accept these recommendations for carryover. So the action we're needing from you this evening is to approve the budget adjustment and the appropriation that's associated with the fiscal year 16 carryover. And that concludes our presentation, but we'll answer your questions.
Mr. Skinner.
Bonnie, just one question, please. When you talk about the obligated, in order to meet one of these, you've got to have it obligated in 2016, and it must be expended in 2017. Is that correct? Is what you said?
Yes, that's the intent.
Do we ever have any department, anything that we have it obligated, and yet we still don't expend it in the year that we're supposed to, so it carries over to 2017? Have we ever had in the past where we actually have money that's not expended by the time that's supposed to be?
We have in the past had that occur where then either it is determined that the expense is not necessary the following fiscal year, or it is again carried over until a second fiscal year.
And who determines what you just said, if it was necessary? Is that the department themselves that say, hey, we really don't need this now?
Yes, their plans may have changed and they unobligate that funding.
And that goes back to where?
If at the end of the fiscal year it's not funded and it's not it's not expended and it's not recommended for carryover to the next year, it falls to the fund balance. And that gets reported in the end of the year fund balance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? So I'll ask a quick one. We don't have the presentation, so I was trying to go back and forth. So could you just pull it up real quick?
PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
So I guess back up one slide there. So this, I guess we'll have, these are from the departments that are going to roll it over from 16 to 17. So this is money that was budgeted in 16 funding.
Yes.
Was there unallocated funds so far? I was trying to read between the two. So is it 3.4 million that is not allocated, or?
Yes, at the end of the year, even after
all this,
even after the carryover, there's $3.4 million in excess of the policy reserve levels.
And that's
Yes.
just in the reserve, in the general fund right now?
Yes.
Yes. And that is roughly a third of what that number was last year?
Yes, I think that's correct.
But we're not discussing that at this time. This is just to approve the carryover from 16 to 17 for the departments.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Buell?
I was just going to say I have no questions. I'm ready to make a motion to approve.
So we have a motion to approve. Any comment, questions? Call the question.
Seven yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go, you got Ms. Williams. I see you trying to run away. Could you? I'm just going to ask you a question real quick before you leave to prepare for the next one. Keep coming.
Wasn't fast enough.
No. Hey, just a quick question, and maybe you could bring it back to the next meeting. And it really goes back to assessments. So, and I've asked this before, but maybe you can bring the right people that can talk and be prepared. Alexander's Crossing, Jackson Gateway, Crossroads Station, that when I saw the assessments, they virtually didn't increase at all. So could you come back at the next meeting and explain, if you elect a developer, these things are worth $1 billion now when we're assessing them at $100 million. Just explain to the board why we're not seeing the dramatic increases that we anticipated based on the assessment.
You're correct, and we are planning to come back to see you in 2 weeks to
Perfect.
discuss this.
Oh, that's even better. Thanks.
So you're welcome.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, board members, with the animal shelter presentation being tabled to another day, that moves us on to a short presentation on some economic development recent events. And Sophia is here from ED to tell us about Quasic, the Business Walk, and the Modern Day Marine Expo.
Have the floor, computer, please. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. We wanted to give you a brief update of recent events. The first event I wanted to start with is the QAISC annual luncheon event that is in August. We can switch to the next slide. The county provides ongoing sponsorship, and they have been for the past couple of years. We've had over 200 attendees attend this year. This brings government contractors to Spotsylvania County. The speakers this year included Congressman Rob Whitman, the Defense Security Service Director, Verizon's principal client partner, and Chairman Tim McLaughlin addressed and welcomed QIC members as well. This is an opportunity to meet defense contractors and promote the county as a desirable business location. The next event I wanted to brief you on is the Business Walk program. We just launched a pilot program this year on August 2nd. We utilized 10 volunteers to visit 102 local businesses. We sampled businesses in the 4 Mile Fork area. This gave us a concentrated sampling for diverse businesses. The surveys were questions about growth and local business climate. We're currently analyzing the data to address common business concerns, and we're planning to continue and expand the program for next year as well. The final event I wanted to brief you on is the Modern Day Marine Expo. This is an annual 3-day event held at Marine Corps Base Quantico. This is our 3rd year participating in the Small Business Pavilion. Our goals are to increase county visibility, strengthen relationships with government contractors, and to promote tourism and to support the base. We had over 300 visitors stop by the county booth, staff engaged with over 80 exhibitors, and we plan to expand regional collaboration for next year. We wanted to take the time to thank Chairman Tim McLaughlin for speaking at the QAIC event and for also stopping by the booth. We also appreciate all of your continued support from members of the board. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions? Mr. Skinner?
You talked about the regional collaboration, and you're going to expand that. Can you tell us how you're going to do that, or what your plans are? How we're going to try to do that?
One of the things that we would like to do in the future is to do programs with our neighbors and not just alone. Most companies don't look at just a particular county, they look at a region. So the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance would be one of the ways to work collaboratively throughout the region and take part in events together.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Hey, so I did attend a couple of these events, and I want to thank Sophie. You did a great job at the Quantico Area Industrial Security Council, because that was one of the highest attended events they've had, and it was just well done, executed perfectly. It was great. And I will tell you, I did also go through the Modern Day Marine, and it's nice to see that the other jurisdictions are following our lead there, and I noticed a couple other booths up there, but not quite as good as ours. But again, thanks for the effort and all that, and next year will be even better. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, next up, at a prior meeting, Regional Library Director Martha Hutzel addressed the board during public comment time about the appropriation of the board for FY17 for the library being approximately $125,000 below what had been requested by the library. And so there were several questions regarding that appropriation. I asked Mr. Cole to put together a presentation. I also observed along the way that there are 46 regional agencies that the board appropriates money to, or appropriated money to in the budget for FY17. And of those 46, 11 were funded below their request, some at zero. So the library is, I just wanted to make that observation that the library, which was appropriated a bit over $4 million in the adopted budget, is certainly not alone in being receiving an appropriation below their request. But Mr. Cole, please.
All right, thank you. Floor computer, please. This first slide just gives you some of the history for the last 5 years of the funding for the Spotsylvania share of the budget and the library's request. The first line is the request, and then what was actually funded. And this is just a look at some of the other member localities, what they've been funding the last 5 years as well, and what was requested of them. And you can see that it's not unusual for a locality to not fund the full request. The difference being that this year we were probably the only locality to do so. And really, it's not a, this is the language, applicable language in the library agreement. I believe it's from 1993 was when the agreement was last updated. And it talks about the funding levels and that the locality can choose not to fully fund the request of the library. And if needed, in order to balance their budget, the library can cut back on services within that locality. And also the jurisdiction may recommend, if we underfund it, what services the library could cut back in the county to balance their budget. And that completes the slides I have. You do have a couple of more information items as part of the agenda. And then we did receive some additional information that I emailed to you after the agenda was published. And I emailed those to you earlier, and also printed them out and put them at your desk if you wanted to look at them. That's what this looks like. And you know, really, it's up to you, you know, to decide, you know, one, if you want to fulfill the library's request for funding, and then two, if not, you can make a recommendation to the library of where they could reduce services if needed to keep their budget in balance within the county. And that really, I think, sums it up. Are there any questions?
Any comments or questions? Mr. Ross?
Do you know why Stafford County provided $50,000 more than requested?
No, I do not. The library, Martha from the library is here, and she may be able.
That'd be great.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. That was provided by Stafford County because Stafford County is very desirous of establishing a joint-use library. It is it's the wave of the future in libraries. It's happening all across the country. A community college and public library in one setting, it saves money. And they hope to have that at their new Stafford campus of Germanna Community College. I believe they have broken ground on that campus. That's as far as they've gotten.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Trampy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know a few minutes ago we were all eyeing the $3.4 million in excess fund balance. So I just wanted to reiterate a point that Mr. Jakubowski made at our last meeting, that this is an ongoing funding item and we need to fund it with ongoing funds, not one-time funds. Thank you, Mr.
Any other comments, questions? Thanks.
All right, thank you.
I have a question, though, on that point. It is ongoing, but this is a gap. Wouldn't that be considered a one-time gap fill?
Well, but then we would presumably have the gap again the following year.
Or wouldn't that be something to address the following year? I'm not sure what the requirement is. So we have a gap. We've identified a gap, a delta of what was funded and requested of $124,531 this year. It seems to me that's a one-time requirement because we actually did put in $4 million.
But you could use that logic for any spending item.
I may say one other thing. Would that be okay?
Sure.
What happens in a regional system is that when one jurisdiction underfunds regularly, the other jurisdictions will also underfund. So it has a domino effect. We work as a regional partner with you. I've heard a lot of talk of regionalism here this evening. It's a very important thing, and it does save your taxpayers a great deal of money. Thank you.
So before you go, I'll just ask you a
Certainly.
question. So, we have increased the budget year over year. Now, granted, it hasn't been to your total request, but it has increased each year. And it appears that for all the jurisdictions for the most part. But say in 16, I guess if you look at the total, it's $1 million less overall. So I guess my question is, you're asking for almost a 20% increase, or is it greater overall library budget? Where does that go?
We left a document with Mr. Taylor back in February. Unfortunately, because Spotsylvania has underfunded the library for 11 years, we divided, we sort of put it on a payment plan, essentially, so that you could get caught up over 4 years, but not that 11
Sure.
years worth of what is owed.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I'm looking at Stafford, who's more underfunded than we are over the last, let's just say from 13 out. Right now they're paying the requested amount in 17. But all I'm saying is you're basically the request over the previous years would be close to $1 million more funding.
The requests are based on the circulation. Salem Church is the absolute busiest branch in the library system. So when the circulation figures are looked at over a calendar year per the contract, our budget request is based on the amount of circulation from each jurisdiction and what we had from last year, with a very modest increase of 1.1% a year.
Well, I was just looking from 16 to 17. It looks like you asked for, if everybody was fully funded, to be another $700,000 more than 16.
I am not certain of that.
And that's
of
all I'm
that
asking
figure.
is,
I'm so
so
sorry.
what were those, or what did you plan on spending that additional $700,000? That seems like a significant increase over each year.
Our book budget has been almost cut in half since the recession, the recent recession. So books, technology upgrades are almost a constant thing. This request of a fully funded budget this year does not include raises for staff. They already know they're not getting a raise. It includes technology upgrades, book budget, and expanded services.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking is
Right.
if you could email back, it's like I said, just, rough math here. It looks about a $700,000 increase from 16 to 17 if you get the full funds. Where would those funds go specifically? What additional services, or what is going into the library?
Books.
You don't have to answer it right now.
Oh,
But if you could send that
okay.
back
You want
to
an
us
email?
with an answer that you can lay out and take some time
Sure.
to actually put it together.
One of the things that the entire board may not be aware of, I believe Mr. Benton is aware of because he was at the presentation, your school system and your county came to the library with a request that we provide rural Wi-Fi access to your residents in your rural districts who do not have Wi-Fi access at home. So we worked with the schools on a couple of meetings. Going into their libraries and bringing the public in wasn't a good fit for them. So we waited for a little while. We spoke to Jane Reeve about offering that access at your 2 or 3 of your community centers, including the Ruritan, the Belmont Ruritan Club, which is owned by the Ruritans. So running fiber optic to those locations would allow the library to come out with laptops, printers, books, staff, and provide expanded access at those locations, because there are no libraries out that way, and there's no Wi-Fi out that way until the fiber optic is run to those locations. So that's an expanded service that we want very much to do. But my library board has already told us you cannot do that unless you're fully funded. So that is the sort of sticking point here.
I guess that's what I'm asking. If those are good things to lay out, and just send back to us, this is where we intend to spend the additional revenues.
All right.
Or different
We'd be
sources,
happy
say,
to do
fire,
that.
and some kind of estimate of what it's going to cost and what it provides the citizens. Because they don't get to see exactly what, there's a $700,000 overall increase, but everybody doesn't necessarily get to see what that's procuring.
We'd be happy to send that. And those who use the library all the time do see it, because they come in and use computers, and they come in to check out books and download articles from our databases. So we'd be happy to send that to you, just a list of what that increase goes to.
Yeah, and kind of the
Thank
cost
you.
associated with each.
I would have assumed that did go into the budget that was prepared and sent last year. I was not the director then, so I could not swear that happened, but we'd be happy to send it.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Mr. Ross?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Bonnie, if you could, so I'm reading the paragraph section 8H of the library agreement, and it seems like there is no requirement to fully fund. So if you could go back to Dr. Trampy's question or remark, as we consider funding the library, if it has to be ongoing or not, or if it can be one time for making up this gap. And the reason I'm really asking is because what I see is there's really no requirement to fully fund based off of Section 8H, so I'm not sure, and we've funded it quite a bit. So is this additional 124, is it possible to use one time for it, or legally do we need to use ongoing?
I don't think it's a legal question. I think it's a question of budget philosophy, really. And if we were to fund the library that additional $125,000, you said you would use it for books.
Books and computers and expanded services like what we want to do at the Ruritan, the Belmont Ruritan Club and the other community centers out that way.
So it's for expanded services that are going to continue. And this is not unlike the conversation we were having with the schools, where we were talking about using one-time money to fund them for fiscal year 17, and we were trying to get them to apply that to one-time uses. But if they apply it to ongoing uses, we're going to have this same problem in fiscal year 18.
So
or the library will have an additional gap in fiscal year 18.
Books and computers appear to me to be one time, not ongoing, or
To use them for buying books or to continuing the services.
The books do get used over and over again, and the computers do get used over again until they become obsolete or the
you're
book
not
falls
planning
apart.
on buying them again next year.
Well, yes, we buy books every year, and computers have to be replaced every year, pretty much. I mean, one breaks or is dead, or something happens to it, just like any other piece of technology.
So, okay. So Bonnie, do we need ongoing money or?
Yes, I would view this as ongoing.
Mr. Benton?
During your presentation last time, you came across to me like you were going to go ahead and cut services to us. Is Spotsylvania in jeopardy of losing services, anytime soon?
As a lover of libraries and as a reader and as a library director, I don't ever want to cut services of any kind anywhere. I will tell you that our library board, which is comprised of representatives from Spotsylvania County, is a little disappointed that the funding has been underfunded. The library's been underfunded for 11 years from Spotsylvania County, and they have said the words to me. Either Spotsylvania County has to, fully fund us this year for a change, or we will cut hours at the branches. And I'm sorry, but I do not have a choice. I'm actually hired by the library board. It's not my choice to do this.
Okay. And Spotsylvania built that library, right?
Of course they did, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, and I'd just like to point out that Spotsylvania owns the libraries that are in Spotsylvania, the Salem Church and the Snow Library. Those are the buildings are the property of Spotsylvania County. However, the books and equipment and stuff inside the library belongs to the Central Rappahannock Regional Library.
Okay.
That is the case.
Is that the same for all jurisdictions?
Yes, I believe it is.
It's actually state law.
Okay.
And you may also not be aware that because we are a large regional library system, we receive the highest amount of state aid to any library system in Virginia. There are some single county-only systems that receive about 10% of what we receive. And that helps us a great deal. It means that we ask less of you. We have the Friends of the Library that raise money for us, and every year they give us over $100,000 in goods and services. That's also less money that we ask from you. They are a private 501c3 that is a fundraising body for the library.
So one other question for you. You mentioned Stafford wants to combine with Germanna, and there's a cost savings associated with that. Although it costs money to get a cost savings, just explain that.
Because it would be a joint use library. Virginia Beach has one that is very large. The Germanna Community College students and the public would use the same library rather than building two separate libraries. In Stafford CIP, they have a plan for 2 more libraries. This would be one of them. It's a very small library of maybe 2,000 square feet. That's what Germanna is looking at. Rather than Germanna building a library and the public library building a library. they plan to have a joint-use library.
I guess I asked the question because of our Germana campus and stuff in the county. Is there a joint-use library there as well?
There is not, but we would love to have one because they are near Massaponax, and Massaponax desperately needs a library.
And we can save money.
You could save a lot of money.
Okay. That's what I want to hear. Mr. Sabula?
Yes, I'd like to explore a little bit something that you had indicated about using some county facilities in the rural areas for internet access for the students. This is something I have a great interest in because the people in Berkeley District are clamoring for it, and it's just hasn't been happening. If you were to receive this money, you would apply it to doing that?
Absolutely, we would. I think it's a phenomenal idea, and it also is a great way to save money because you don't have to build a new building out that way. The building is already there. So what we would bring out is a collection of materials, computers. They would have access to all of the databases that we have in all of our libraries that everyone has access to. We bring printers so they could print. We can bring staff that can help them with homework assistance, or if they have a resume that needs to be updated, or whatever their request or question is. We would love to do that at 3 of your community centers that are in rural areas.
I'd love to see it happen too, but I think we have some problems involved, and that is actual access at those sites that we're thinking of, and I know I've discussed that with Jane, and I don't think that's in the near or immediate future, and I'd just like to hear more about this.
Jane is probably the best one to answer that,
Yes.
but one of them is ready to go as far as I understand.
Well, while Jane's coming to the podium, I do want to point out that there was $60,000 added to my recommendation for the library budget for 17, which was approved by the board, and that $60,000 was tagged with Martha, at least. I didn't speak to the library board, but the commitment between Director Hutzel and I was that $60,000 would be used to begin working toward a rural internet access model. We were thinking with the schools, and as she's described, it's headed in the direction of the community centers because there's a wonderful level of cooperation that we're encountering when we talk with the community center folks about the prospect of bringing internet connectivity there. Jane?
Mr. Sabula, we have, thanks to Mr. Crail, who is running the fiber project throughout the county at all of our fire rescue stations, we run past almost all of the community centers in that endeavor. As a result of that, we've been able to maximize the use of the CIP funding that we already have to get fiber to those facilities. We have completed the fiber run to the Berkeley Community Center. We are working out an arrangement with the Ruritan's Club out at off of Belmont Road. We already have it at Lick Run, and it should be out to the remaining of the community centers probably within the next 6 to 8 months, maybe a year at the most. So the rural areas, as a result of the work we have going out to fire rescue stations, is already complete. So Martha, the schools, Mr. Taylor, and myself have been working in meetings to try to come to some terms on how to provide that service, even if it's in a limited fashion, for the citizens in those rural areas that we are struggling to get broadband services out to. So it's close, very close.
So basically, in answer to my question, that additional funding could be used immediately to help make that happen.
That is correct. It can be used immediately to help make that happen. I do want to say one other thing. We go through an annual audit, and we use Bowling Franklin and Company. The auditor recommends strongly that we keep 25% of our operating budget in our fund balance. For the last several years, we've not been able to do that because we've been underfunded, so we've tapped into the fund balance on a regular basis rather than just for an emergency basis. It's currently at about 19 or 20%. The auditors will not be happy with that. We have to start replacing the fund balance. We have to. We don't have a choice.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Jane.
So, Mr. Chairman, just one other thing. Understand that Mr. King is stepping down from the board.
Mr. King has been on the board for 8 years, and there are term limits per the contract.
And some of the other localities, they have their board member serve. You know, we've had, at least in recent years, 2 citizen members serve. So, you know, I just throw that out as an option. The board can appoint a board member or even a staff member to serve on the library board if needed, if that is something you desire.
Okay. Mr. Benton.
I just I want to give props to Jane and Mr. Taylor and those ideas that they've. If I'm excluding somebody, I apologize. But as far as getting that cable and fiber optic over to our community buildings in Belmont, that was an outstanding idea and thinking well ahead for these communities. I guess what happened. What brought that? I think one of the things that brought that about. Kirk Twigg with the school board had suggested the schools out in the rural areas. Well, apparently, the school board, if a principal who's at the school balks at that idea, which they have, they don't like using their authority to move that forward. So basically, the idea of Kirk using any of the schools has failed because of the principals not wanting to, and I don't know why. No reasoning was given to me, and if I'm throwing somebody under a bus or giving misinformation, well, I'll be glad to listen, but that's what I've gotten so far in the meetings I've attended and in speaking to school board members and to, well, Mr. Twigg. So apparently they can't tell principal what to do. But anyway, that's how that came about, and the idea, the forward thinking of Mr. Taylor, and I greatly appreciate it.
Mr. Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a question, so I want clarification on this. We showed $124,000 shortage. That was this year?
Correct.
And so at one time, the last thing you told us, if we didn't come up with it, we were going to cut services, basically. That's what I heard. Is that correct?
I'm sorry to say, but
I'm just asking a question.
Yes,
that's all.
that is true.
So now we're showing $124,000 shortage, and now you're saying we're going back 11 years, and we're finding the shortages, and we're going to make that up?
No, there's no
Okay.
way to do that.
No, thank you.
It's too
Okay.
high a number. I started to explain that we want desperately for all of the jurisdictions to come into parity, and it's going to take you guys a little bit more each year to do that, unfortunately.
Well, so explain what you mean by parity as far as, I know what parity is, but what I'm saying is, okay, we have a certain amount, we've underfunded you for 11 years.
Correct.
Okay. And so we know we have this $124,000 and we're going to try to make up for last year, correct?
Yes.
And now, and then, okay, my understanding is then now we've got this.
The 124,000 is for FY17.
Right.
The year we're in.
Yes.
Not last year.
Okay, I understand it. Now we're going to go back?
No, I don't think we dare to ask for, in order for Spotsylvania to fund the library at the level required by the regional library agreement, the agreement which is based on circulation statistics. You guys have heavy users, that's all I can say. It's almost 40% of the regional library system is users from Spotsylvania County. So the county would need to increase its funding for FY17 by $453,651. There was no way we were going to ask for that from you in 1 year.
Okay.
The idea was to balance it out and divide it over 4 years so that by 2020, you would be all caught up. We can't go back and do ancient history on the 11 years. That's actually $3.8 million, and it's just not going to happen. That's our assumption.
So what you're looking at is an additional, above what we normally give, $110,000 for the budget to catch up.
I'm
You
not
said
sure
4
where-
years, we had $453,000 over to come up to parity.
It would have been 110 if there was absolutely no other increase, but we generally do put in about a 1.1% increase into the budget from every jurisdiction because everything goes up, just like the school systems and everyone else.
Okay.
I know it's a little bit confusing. It's a regional system and everyone pays into it based on their circulation from their jurisdiction.
Understand. Okay, so again, I'm sorry to keep someone over
That's
this
all
because I
right.
do want to understand it. Because if any citizen asks me, I want to be able to explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. Okay? So let's go with the 124,000 we know we shortened 17. So we're going to try to find a way to give that to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, what additional money we're looking at is $453,000 over a 4-year period?
That's news to me, Mr.
Well,
Skinner.
no, that's what I'm telling you. You've
looking
used that
forward.
money.
The request made at public presentation by the director at the recent meeting was simply for the $124,517.
And that is all we're
or whatever it
asking
is.
for, correct?
Okay.
Right.
That's
But
it.
we would need to ask for that amount or something similar over the next 3 years, so that by 2020, you would be considered caught up in your arrears. Because we cannot go back and do 11 years worth of back funding shortages. That would not be fair to you, and it's not possible.
So, Mr. Taylor, I've got a couple. First of all, so we're not based on a per capita cost?
No, you are not.
It's based on circulation. Can we get the floor computer back and go back to the language in 8A? Mark, can you get that slide back? Because it's
So as you're looking for that, so you've already earmarked $60,000 additional?
there was, in the budget request that the board adopted, there was an earmark of $60,000 requested to work for rural
to do that,
internet access.
and that's something you said you would use the money for anyway.
We asked for an increase of $186,000 before this rural Wi-Fi issue ever came up. I was
Right.
not the director when that request was made.
So your
So you gave
124,000
62, correct.
includes the 60,000 already.
That's, no. We asked for an increase of $186,000.
Right, so
That
this
went
is-
to your budget department last year. You gave us an increase of $62,000. We have come back and asked you to fully fund us and give us the $124,581 this year. We're not asking for any more money this year.
So just to clarify, you say we're $124,000 short. Did you already give them the $60,000 that you said you had earmarked?
You guys already
It's
approved
budgeted
that.
for 17.
That's included in the $404,066,000?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out that there is no required funding. I mean,
Right, there is no arrearage.
Yeah, you know, we.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a contract. and-
I guess that I'm looking at all the other regional organizations. We're on a per capita. We pay X number of dollars per citizen. And I don't understand why, how do we generate, oh, you use the library more, so you should pay more. Well, wouldn't it behoove the other citizens, the other counties to use it more?
That's fundamental to the way the library agreement was drawn back in 1993. It's a utilization-based agreement, so that those that use more pay more, and those that use less pay less. And if you go back,
Well, Fredericksburg is a very small city, and Westmoreland County is a very rural, small county with three very tiny branches with all part-time staff. So Stafford uses more, and you guys are the next one because you guys are the two big players in this.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd just like to point out that, you know, in the past, you know, we have not been the only member locality that has not funded what was requested by the library, as you can see in this slide. So again, you know, I take issue with the terminology that we were required to fund it at a certain amount. The library, they put forward a budget request every year, and then it's up to you all to decide what, this is per the agreement, it's up to you all to decide how much of that you are going to fund on the library. And if the library decides that they cannot continue to provide the level of services they have been providing at the funding level you all provide, then they can cut back services at the branches in our county. I mean, that's how the agreement works. And also, you all can make recommendations to the library of what services you know what should be cut as well.
Okay.
Mr. Skinner.
Okay, thank you. Now, I understand the 60, you requested 186, we gave you 60, now you're coming back for the 124.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And I'm
Okay.
sorry that I confused anything.
No,
with
that's
the
okay.
past.
Now my next question is, you told me that by 2020, I'm going to be paid up or equal?
That is correct.
And how much is that going to cost me each year above and beyond what you request?
I'm sorry, I do not have the answer to that. We would put that in the request. In the budget request,
Right.
we would have those numbers in there to say, if you give us this much increase this year, and this year, you would be completely caught up by 2020. I think that it is almost the exact same figure of the 186. It must be very, very identical to that.
Is that the, we did mention $453,000.
Yeah.
Is that what we're trying to catch up to by 2020?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Okay,
that was very confusing.
No, that's okay. It is confusing.
It
That's
is
why I've
very-
asked
I
the
know.
question. I want the public to understand it too.
And I do too, and I will apologize that I did not prepare, I was not the library director then, and I didn't prepare a lot of this. I'm trying to learn it as I'm going.
Understand. So of that 453, that's a separate issue from what you're going to request this year.
The 186 is part of that. And
Okay.
then over the next few years, we would request the rest
Okay.
of that.
So the 186 is going to be part to make up that 453 for the next 4
Absolutely.
years.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. I think what we'd like to see is what those figures are exactly for the next 4 years out then, as far as to make it up. If you look at the 453 divided by 4, you're going to look at about $110,000, roughly $112,000 a year in addition.
If there was no other increase, that is correct. But we do build in a 1.1% increase from each jurisdiction to cover increased costs of everything.
So we give you the 124 now, okay, and we're going to try to find that to make up for that.
Correct.
Are you still in the same position if we can't come up with the additional of the 453 to stop services?
In the next few years, I would hope that the library board would say, you do not need to do that. Spotsylvania County has done what they can in FY17 and FY18, FY19. I just ask that you do whatever you can to fully fund us.
I just need to understand because I got a few calls and a few emails asking why we haven't funded the library, okay? So I understand it now. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Citizens love the library. We do a lot of things. I think you have a list in front of you of what we do.
It's a great library,
It
and
is.
you can't walk in there and you have to wait sometimes to use
I know.
computers. I mean, we use it for meeting rooms. It's a great library.
It's
And
constant.
it's a good asset for the county.
Okay.
It
Mr.
is. Thank you.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for coming back,
Thank you for inviting me.
and thank you for answering all the questions, and welcome.
Thank you. And by the way, congratulations on your AAA bond rating. I think that's phenomenal.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other compliments you'd like to give us? Because I'm thinking of some for the library, so we can go back and
Thank
forth
you.
for a while.
I am really proud to be your library director. I've worked for the library for 28 years. The previous director was there for 44 years. It's a phenomenal library system. We've won an award from the Fredericksburg Regional Chamber of Commerce. We've won an award that's nationally ranked. It's called the Star Library Award. We've won it 8 years in a row. So you guys should be extremely proud of your library system. We're actually the envy of most of Virginia. When I
Right.
go to meetings, people, oh, well, you work for the regional library. You work for Curl. That's different. You guys are special. So we are.
Good, good. No, I know that you guys do get high marks, and every time I've been there, I know that especially Salem Church, is incredibly crowded.
It's very crowded.
And I would say, though, that there are other ways that the county does contribute to that. In 2005, we did take out a bond referendum and put the addition that we're currently paying.
Thank you for that. It's a beautiful building.
Yeah, and at the time, I even asked if that was big enough, or did we need to go even more?
Clearly, it's not.
And yeah, but I was assured by the architects it was fine. So, but which brings me to the question of additional locations. Talking about, and that's very intriguing, what Mr. McLaughlin said about using Germanna. In doing a situation such as that, we are then adding another location, which then would, in theory, add to the amount of usage by our citizens, which would then increase the amount of money we would owe the library system.
It may, but if those citizens who are using Salem Church and and realize that there's another library in that Massaponax area or near the Germanic campus, use that instead. You know, you're not adding more people to the community. So you don't really add that many new users. You just add people who use a different location. As the population increases in a community, yes, that will happen.
Right. Well, and that is the thought, is that in that area especially, we have an awful lot of units that have already been approved for development. And
I'm
so
aware.
we need to get ahead of the curve and start looking into that. Question, since you're here, and I was really wondering, what I hear from just people that work at the library, and nobody in particular, is that the computers and the meeting space is like the top of what you do.
They are.
Okay.
They are.
So to look at a new type of library that would coordinate with the library system, that would be a building that would have a computer lab and meeting space would be, and not filled up with books, because then you don't have to have all the room nor the inventory, but you could do the book exchange as you currently do in the system anyway.
Absolutely. Culpeper has a beautiful storefront library. It's in a shopping center, and
I've
it's
been there.
absolutely gorgeous.
Yes.
Jefferson Madison Regional Library, which is the Charlottesville, Albemarle area, they turned an old, I believe it was a hardware store, into an absolutely gorgeous two-story library. If I were you, I would be looking at a storefront in Massaponax rather than building a new building. We'd love to have a new building, but I'm not sure that's necessary in this day.
Right.
I would be very thrilled with a storefront library in the Massaponax area, and your citizens would use it. They'd be happy. There's plenty of parking.
Right. Well,
So-
and the thought being is that, that our EDA owns a building in South Point, which I don't think that the parking would be adequate for the usage. But you have the old shopping area behind there that might be something to look at, which is something I think that we should look at, because it's going to take years to get to that. So why not start looking at that to begin with?
You did have at one point in your CIP a branch out near Lake Anna, which is near where we're going to try to do the rural Wi-Fi
Right.
access, and a branch in Massaponax. So I don't know if those are still in your long-range CIP or not.
Well, they very well could be, but I haven't heard of any funding going towards them in the near
I
future.
haven't either.
So, but I would also ask the $124,000, just so that we're clear of what Mr. Trampy had stated that I stated before, which I'm not a fan of outside budget time adjustments unless they're necessary or a case can be made for them. We do them. I'm not saying that we can't do it. But that 124 then would go into the base budget, that then next year you're going to be asking for another roughly $200,000 above. So if you do not get that 124, in theory, you would add 124 plus the 200 next year and be asking for about 330 in rough numbers.
I believe we would, yes. We've just gotten started on our budget for FY18, but I believe we would have to do that.
Okay, so I would just caution the board that if we're going to do it, we can use one-time monies that are sitting there, but knowing that we would then have to replenish those with ongoing monies from somewhere. So we don't have a bag of money sitting somewhere that just keeps getting filled year after year. We need to just be a little cautious about that, just because the worst thing to do is to get that 125 this year, you come back next year for 200, and then we have to pull out the 125 too. And that, nobody wants to go down that road. So
I wouldn't want you to either.
okay, good. but that is my hesitation of doing anything quickly. I would like to do it a little bit methodically and just find it, make sure it's the right way, and then take care of the issue as opposed to rushing in. So, thank you again.
You.
Okay. I think that's all the questions. We got to start moving on here. Thanks
Thank
for
you very much.
participation.
Chairman, we're just a few minutes from the appointed hour for a public hearing. The board might want a brief recess ahead of that time, or should we
I'd say let's
go
just-
through staff reports?
Just staff reports and
information
drive on.
matters? All right. Reports. We do board reports. Yeah, I had Well, ahead of board reports, I have my own and invite comment from our county attorney. I wanted to mention that October is Manufacturing Month in the U.S., and I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, board members, this crept up on us after the agenda was published, or we would have had a proclamation on your agenda for this evening just recognizing October as Manufacturing Month. It is interesting to note from the 2014 census that 4.2% of Spotsylvania employees ages 16 and older are employed in the manufacturing sector. And also want to note that we are, and Tom Tom and I and his ED team and the Regional Alliance are all working very hard to build manufacturing in the county. We are blessed by our workforce, many of whom are out commuters and a good number of those work in the manufacturing sector. And as we have success in attracting manufacturing business here, they will find competent and able employees ready to serve them and have the opportunity not to drive so far to work. Also wanted to mention publicly, and I know the board is aware, there have been a couple of strings of email recently wherein board members have asked questions regarding school division budget items, school division expenditures, patterns of expenditure, where the money goes, what it pays for, where it came from. Typically the same sorts of questions, I would say, that the board asks of our finance staff during budget time, and in that process with our own staff, those have been very informal communications, and the staff has felt free to ask follow-up questions to the board members that have the inquiries. I wanted to just mention that and ask for the board's input or thoughts on approach to interacting with the school division about the same type of inquiries. Those of you who have had those questions, I sent email back where the typical response from the division is simply, well, why do they want to know? And you're simply asking for financial data, simple information. I am not a mind reader and don't go at the issue with foreknowledge, and I'm not sure that, frankly, candidly, that why you want to know is relevant. It's public information about items of public money and its expenditure. How would we, as the county, like to approach, or how would the board prefer to see these interactions approached going forward?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Yakubowski.
If I might, I'm somebody who asks a lot of questions from our side and the school side. And dealing with our finance staff, for example, one of the questions that, or one of the ways that a question is asked, at least from me, because they do ask, well, not in the certain language of why you're looking for this, but it's more to then direct the answer to what I'm looking for, because it can be a very broad question and you're looking for a very specific answer, and you can take it over multiple emails when staff and school staff knew the intention ahead of time. I mean, I've never taken any of those type of questions to mean we're not going to tell you, because I at least with this school administration, last one perhaps, but this one no, but mainly just to find out, well, what are you trying to get at? Because I know the budget very well, being a staff person, and you don't. So if you tell me where you're heading, I can get you there much quicker. And so I would say that, and it's up to any board member's preference, but my preference is to talk it out, to really let them know what I'm looking for, the data that I'm trying to obtain, and then that way they can find it. Because the other thing too is there's lots of pots of money, there's lots of different things that are required, there's lots of different things that are in the budget that I don't know, and they can navigate quicker if they knew where you're trying to end up.
So, did you have a question? Oh, Mr. Ross?
Mr. Chair, I'm one of the guilty culprits here that's asked the question. And I think the question I've asked is pretty clear.
So I'm not sure what the deal is. I don't think it matters. And I'm looking to clarify some figures that they have sent over to us. But it's very clear in what I'm asking for, and I'm just, because I want to know. I don't think there's any guessing or anything else that I could add to my question that would make it any more clear what I'm asking for.
Mr. Benton?
I'm guilty of the same thing. I think the last question I asked was very straightforward. It was in the email, basically how much are they spending on fireworks and who's paying for it, or where does the money come from? It was pretty straightforward, and I get calls from school board members questioning where I'm going with this and everything. It's just information that I think, as you know, since we're deciding the tax rates and spending this money and giving money to them, we had the right to know, and especially when our neighbors start asking questions. And I would just like the information. If it makes it easier on you, Mr. Taylor, for myself, I'll send it to my school board member, Mr. Twigg, and then just copy everybody else. And matter of fact, I guess I'll need to start putting it into a FOIA request, because I agree with you. It's taken a long time to get information that should be fairly readily available, in my opinion. And they're basic questions.
Mr. Skinner?
I've watched a couple of emails that come through. I don't think it's what scares me is when we ask our staff to do something like this in the detail that I've seen from some questions from our supervisors. And I don't want to put the burden on our staff here, because we could really get bogged down with a lot of requests. It's the detail that we're asking for. And everything is public, like you said. It's information out there on the website. And actually, what I would like to see, because when I have problems with the school, I go to my school board member and ask her to find that out. That way, she can put it on the school board without having our staff here, which is really doing a lot of stuff for us. I think the information's out there. But my personal opinion is going through my representative on the school board is the best way to handle it and keep the burden off of our staff here. And I've looked at a couple of emails and being on school board, I know that there's a lot of information you've asked for on that stuff, and by detail, where they spend it on, every bit of money. And I will also say, being on the school board, is they are elected officials, and their responsibility is to spend their money. Our responsibility is to give them their money, and what they ask for, what we think is appropriate at that time. And if the public does not like what they're spending on, then they should look for a new member on the school board. That's the way I look at it there. But I don't want to get involved in the school business, because under the responsibility stated by the state, it says what a school board member does and what the supervisor does. I don't want to have a conflict in there at all. So I just ask, I think the better way to do it is let your board member give you the information. I think they're very appropriate, and they can talk to you about how, exactly what you want and how much time it's going to take to get that.
Mr. Sabula?
Yeah, just briefly, I think the confusion here is very simple. Requests that come from supervisors through staff to outside are viewed as being from this board, not from the individual. We send requests through staff from this board. We don't send requests to staff to outside organizations like the school board from the Board of Supervisors. We send it as a supervisor or as an individual citizen. But we need to make sure that we're not confusing the two, because the perception is that these requests are coming from the Board of Supervisors and they're coming from individual supervisors. We need to keep that distinction clear, and I think that's where the problem's coming.
So, Mr. Taylor, I'm going to continue to send, if I have questions, to you and let you disseminate them to the appropriate person and all that. But I would hope that somebody from the school staff has not told you or came back, why do you want to know? And if that does occur, hope you send that to the superintendent and to the chairman of the school board, because that's unprofessional, and that shouldn't occur. Because when you ask a question from one of the board members, that is a request, and it should be honored. It shouldn't get a, well, why do they need to know? Well, the answer is because we asked. So if you could pass that on, I'd appreciate that. Can we move on to public comment?
Absolutely. Amy, is there anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, sir.
Should I run through the guidelines again, Mr. Chairman?
Yes. No, I think we're okay on that.
Okay.
Mike Smith.
Good evening, Board of Supervisors and our administrator and support staff. I want to thank you for your service to this county and for all the good work that you do. My name is Mike Smith. I live at 9003 Chancery Court, Spotsylvania, Virginia, Livingston District. I just have a couple items that I want to go through tonight, so I'll be brief and I won't go into any detail. I picked up the agenda online and I came here with the idea of speaking to a couple topics. But first of all, as far as the library, I'm a frequent user of the Salem Church Library, and the personnel and the staff there have been completely professional and outstanding. Whether it's room use, looking at the newspapers and magazines in the back, or getting on a computer for a few minutes, service has been outstanding. I've known it to be busy. I can't say I've ever seen it to be crowded, and this includes Sunday afternoons, of which about three times a month I'm there, and then on Thursday evenings as well. Library is a place for research, it's for studying, it's for knowledge. A lot of those computers are being used for entertainment as well, and that may be one of the reasons why there's a lot of use in the computers. You can see it. You walk by the computers, you can see different sites and things that are on there. But it's still a great place, and I know people go there to connect with the outer world and other people, and it's a good thing. And I applaud the people in charge there. I also want to say thank you to the Spotsylvania County Public School System. They recently published the adopted FY17 school budget. At a previous school meeting, I was told it would be done by 30 September. It was done, it was posted, and it is on the website. And I asked that all the supervisors, please review that FY17 adopted budget. This is not the approved budget from back in April, but now the adopted budget. Look at where the difference is. Money, I'm conducting research and reviewing it myself. And I believe also that transparency and accountability in all government operations is key and is something we should have in this county. Just briefly now on the animal shelter, I was tipped off by the article in the Freelance Star that there's a potential for the size and scope to include the budget increase in the size of the shelter. I took the agenda and I see that you had a presentation that you may or may not be giving tonight. It includes 5 alternatives. It talks about an increase of $600,000 potentially. I have a pet. I have her since a puppy. She'll be 15 in November. We love our dog. A lot of animals become family members, as you all well know. We'll take care of her through her end of life, and I have the means to do that, and we love that dog. We will never, ever take that dog to a shelter or force it on anyone else to care for it. But I understand that's not the case with everybody. But I also like to ask, whatever decision you make, first of all, 5 alternatives as presented here, that's probably too many. You may need to go back and, 1, 2, 3, okay? And what meets the needs? May I have 30 more seconds? And I will wrap up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Just please look at the financial side, look at what was approved, and look what additional request is needed for this. I understand there is a need, and the Freelance Star said, this will meet the needs for the next 10, 15 years. I don't know exactly how you predict that, but please use all the alternatives, look at the size and scope that meet the best interest of the county and, of course, of the animals that end up there as well. And I appreciate the efforts and the research that is going into making that decision. I thank you, supervisors, and thank you, everybody, and thank you. Have a good night.
There are no other citizens signed up to speak.
Would anybody like to speak that did not sign up? Sir?
Dogs. I've been, first of all, I'm a Spotsylvania native. But
Sir, could you just state your name and
Oh, I'm Terry
address?
Payne. Terry Payne, live at 1331 Post Oak Road, Spotsylvania, Virginia. Anyway, we'll start since 1993. I built this home, and I paid for it. I worked for Virginia Dominion Power from 74 up till I retired a few years ago, 31 years. And in 2006, this family moved in, and they had a whole passel of dogs. And, well, I was younger then, so we kept battling it out. I've been to court twice. They didn't do no good. I talked to the sheriff once, and I thought I'd done some good. They didn't do any good. And then here, 7 months ago, this family moved in right next door to me. Well, the property there is square, the one family, and the other one owns the other part, so they both joined mine. And about 7 months ago, they moved in with another passel of dogs. And I mean them dogs, both groups of them are 24 hours a day. They'll quieten down at night a lot of times. And there's another one down the road, 13333. I never even turned him in. But him and this one at 321, Tyler, when he don't want to bark, he'll call down there and he'll bark. He'll send his dogs barking. And I had a stroke listening to him. And I don't plan on having another one because of it. That's why I'm having trouble talking. But I'll get better. But 13321, 13325, and 13353, I need some help. And the dog warden won't even come here. They said there's no laws or anything. There's no reason to even come out. No reason to adopt it, to come out there and see. I don't think that's right to me. And like I said, I talked to the sheriff. Went to court twice because I thought I could take it and get it, put ahead, get out of the county, get a little higher. And the girl said, no, you can't do nothing like that. So here I am right back again. That's it.
Thanks for the comments. Greg, is that yours? Thanks, sir. Anyone else like to speak that did not sign up? Okay, thank you. We want a public hearing?
Yes, sir. A public hearing is on budgeting of the 2016 bond sale proceeds.
Hello again. On July 12th, the board authorized the sale of up to $36 million in general obligation bonds to finance replacement of the computer-aided dispatch system, replacement fire and EMS equipment, fire training center improvements, renovation of the animal shelter, road improvements at Hickory Ridge Route 1 and at Exit 118, and school technology, bus replacements, and capital maintenance. On September 6th, the county closed on the sale of $27.985 million in bonds for these projects. An all-in interest rate, including the cost of issuance, of 1.64% was obtained on this issue. With exception of school projects, we don't budget proceeds of the projects as part of the budget. We don't budget the proceeds until the bond transaction is finalized. And so tonight before you is a budget adjustment allocating the bond proceeds among the projects that I just mentioned and to the payment of the cost of issuance associated with the bonds. It also adjusts the budget transportation fund debt service to be in line with that expected to be incurred in fiscal year 17 based on the finalized bond sale. The amount of this budget adjustment is such that a public hearing is required, and that's why we've scheduled the public hearing for this evening. So I ask that you please open the public hearing at this time.
Have any comments from the board? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing.
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Would anybody that did not sign up like to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any other board comments or? Monty, one question. What's the difference between proceeds and premiums on the revenue?
The proceeds are the same. The proceeds include the premiums. Actually, on this budget adjustment, I see what your question is now. There is a line called bond principal, and then in addition to that, we have premiums. The premium comes from the way the deal is structured. If you have a premium, then you can issue less principal and you still end up with the same amount of proceeds. It's just the way the deal is structured with the market at the time. In this instance, because we got a premium, we were able to issue less principal, and so that's just the way it's structured. But we have two different accounts, and that's why it's shown on here separately.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? We have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Call the question.
Seven yes.
Thank you.
Or
Yes, Mr. Chairman. County Attorney and Board reports.
no report. Mr. Skinner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes. First of all, I'd like to well, I don't know how many people out there know, but Spotsy's always had a small saying that Spotsy should stay spotless. And what I wanted to do was just emphasize what a beautiful county we have. And what would be nice is everybody takes a little extra time to maybe make sure their garbage is secure, stuff that you see alongside the road if you happen to have a chance to pick it up and everything, because we can make this even a more beautiful county, especially out in the rural areas by Lake Anna and stuff of that nature. So once again, I just wanted to, I don't know how many people knew it, but there was a saying that we keep Spotsy spotless. So I'd like to encourage everybody to do what they can to keep our county nice. The other thing I'd like to do is in front of you, I gave you a resume for Rebecca Mann. And what I'm doing tonight is either without objection, I would like to appoint her to the Minority Affairs Committee as the NAACP representative, and also the committee, the Workforce Investment Board Committee. And without objection, I can make a motion that she is appointed to both those committees. I can do it both at the same time, right?
You can do both at the same time or one or the other. But
I'd like to
obviously, you risk, if somebody doesn't want one, then they might not vote for both.
Go ahead. I'd make a motion to appoint both at the same time. Thank you.
Any comments or questions? All right, call the question.
Seven yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Mr. Benton?
I'm going to compliment Mr. Skinner a little bit on what he was talking about, keeping Spotsy a little cleaner. I was just going to ask that, Mr. Taylor, I don't know if y'all remember, it's been a couple months, I think. Mr. Baxter, an attorney, came before us talking about our medians and how they are overgrown and the appearance it gives for Spotsylvania County. Well, I took note of that presentation, and I've actually been trying to pay attention and looking, and I know our county staff mows from our Parkway area anyway down to, I think it's Robert E. Lee, and keeps it cut and nice throughout the year. And I'm not saying we have to do it every month or every single week, but I think it would be incumbent upon our county to at least look at the possibility of doing some on some of the main medians, like Route 3. I went through there today, and it looks trashy. And you go to the city of Fredericksburg, and everything is manicured and nice, and just gives an attractive appearance for the city. And I just ask that we look at that, and if there are ways we can work that to please, let's try to make that work if the board would agree.
Oh, that we let Sean Nelson out of the room, because primarily the VDOT medians are their responsibility. The city maintains their own streets. We may be able to bring back information on Adopt a Highway or other programs if they're active in VDOT that might enable.
Well, I understand that VDOT does the medians for our county, but,
And their
they only
standard
got
is-
so much money either. And,
Right.
we've set a precedence now where we're maintaining this median out here. I don't know whether it was by proffer or what the deal is, but from, almost Plantation Forest all the way down to Robert E. Lee, that median and those sides, I see our staff doing that. It's not VDOT. And, I'm just asking, some of the main ones, if we could look at possibly getting that done. to give the aesthetics of our county, make the aesthetics of our county a little better. I mean, it does look trashy. And if you're going along Route 3, and any of y'all going home that way, take a look at the median. It's trashy. And you compare it to some of the others around that where they're obviously using their own staff to cut it on a fairly routine basis. It looks very attractive and very inviting for business and everything else, I would think.
Yep, Mr. Benton, if I may.
Yes, sir.
We are looking at the entrance corridors with the next budget cycle to look at the cost and possibly come forward with a new initiative to do that. Just for clarification, VDOT cuts the grass on the medians, and that's all VDOT does. If there's trees, like in the on Courthouse Road that you're referring to, VDOT doesn't do anything with those trees. Any mulching, trimming, et cetera, would have to be done either by outsourcing or using county staff to do that. The area in the courthouse is done currently by a combination of Parks and Rec staff, along with the use of the regional jail inmates at times. But the availability of the jail inmates is spotty, so we use them when we can. So we are looking at the Route 3, the courthouse, and of course, again, this evening, the group that spoke earlier about Spotsylvania Parkway, that is a stretch of median there that is going to have to be either maintained by the HOA or by someone else. So we are looking at that as a new initiative to at least bring forward the cost for doing those entrance corridors for the county, and we'll look at the cost, and we'll look at the resources necessary to do it in-house or to outsource that for the next budget cycle.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I say, I really, after Mr. Baxter gave that presentation, I started really trying to just pay attention, and sure, he's right. And like I say, VDOT's not going to do it but so many times, a year.
I actually drove a couple of them myself today. And the weeds that are growing up, mainly between the expansion joints, because when they put the salt and sand down during the wintertime, it collects in those grooves and then it sprouts. So those corridors do. But we currently don't have funds in the budget to do that, but we will look at it in the next budget cycle to bring forth a new initiative to take care of those.
I appreciate it. Just something to look at, and if we can swing it, and like I say, it doesn't have to be every month, but
we're on it.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman. Just to give some history, what happened during the fiscal crisis of 08 and 09, VDOT cut back. They had their funds significantly reduced, and they cut back on how often they mow their right-of-way, and they've never gone back, I think, as far as I know, and revisited that. They used to, prior to the fiscal crisis, mow those medians and right-of-ways more frequently than they do now. So it may be something, I don't know, that VDOT needs to take a look at as well.
VDOT does so much right now, and with the situation that the Commonwealth is in as far as cutting or their shortfalls, I don't know that that's going to happen. Yeah. I remember that.
Mr. Benton, where am I looking? Over here. I appreciate your comments. This is something that I've already taken action on with Mr. Petrovich to come up with a budget and a cost to see what it would do to take care of our entranceways.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Trampy, you done? One more. Hold on.
Sorry. And I guess if the board would entertain me, I know we have some funds available, and I know it's going to be coming up as far as the turnout gear. So, Chief, I was going to ask that you come and do a presentation for us, because I know it's been brought up before about the second set of turnout gear. And basically what I'm looking for, why do we need a second set? Which, being a firefighter, I do have some information on that. But for the others, what surrounding jurisdictions have second sets, if any? And if not, what ones are out there? And the breakdown of the cost and a plan. Just so we can have some information and make a knowledgeable decision on what to do with those requests.
I understand. To answer a couple of your questions, prior to asking for carryover funds this year, I did just that, and the majority of the, I'll say, other than the most small departments, do have the second set, and it's strictly a health and safety issue. It, as you know, the gear picks up contaminants. We have various policies where we use fans and wash-offs after fires, but it doesn't take out the actual, it helps, but it doesn't take the chemicals out. When you can't wear a set and wash a set basically at the same time, it involves overtime of people coming back in. Also, having one set puts a large degree of wear on the gear, which causes it to be replaced more often. When gear is damaged, ripped, any type of chemical process, anything that has it to go back to have it repaired, there is no second set of gear. So when you look at all of those, it's pretty much a standard process that most of the departments our size or larger go through. It's just like having two sets of underwear or two pair of blue jeans or whatever. It's you have to be able to wash one and wear one, and or to repair one, and that's where the request comes from. But I can provide additional if you'd like.
And maybe even include the possibility of the more of the washers that we use to wash our turnout gear, if that would be an alternative. Just if you could do a very as thorough as you can with as many options, pros, cons.
I will. Mr. McLaughlin has asked to do a presentation, which will be done next meeting, and that will be on the various improvements to the system. And I want to try to keep that at a reasonable time, so I wouldn't want to put that into it. But certainly we can work on that and come back at a yet later meeting and do that presentation.
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Believe it or not, that's all I have.
No, it's good. I know what to get the chief for Christmas now. Another set of underwear. So, Mr. Tramping?
No report.
T-shirts.
Mr. Yakubowski?
Oh, you're jumping all the way to me? Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm just
sorry.
going to
Oh, okay.
mix it up.
Yeah, make sure I'm paying attention. I have nothing except I wanted to piggyback on Mr. Benton with the medians and all. I did talk to Mr. Baxter about the area over off of Lafayette, and then talked to Mr. Taylor about getting the prisoners over there to do some work. But also, I know cities and counties are different, but as we all know, VDOT is not going to do any of this. So whether we undertake this or we don't determines whether or not it gets done. And I know that the one city that I've seen that I've been very impressed with, because I've been there several times, is Lynchburg. They do a very good job of having adopt a median with businesses, and you think Fredericksburg looks nice. They really do a top-notch job. So it'd be nice to see what program they have, how they get people to get involved, because that's always the biggest thing, is get them involved, get the money to pay for the actual project. And it's always difficult to get that started and rolling along. So I think it's a good idea, and it sounds like we're going to have some information coming back. Thank you.
Mr. Sabula?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you in your packets this evening was a resolution that I'm asking for approval of. It's in support of native forests as a key component of natural disaster reduction. Annually on 13 October is the International Day for Disaster Reduction. And if I may, I'd like to read the resolution and ask for approval. Whereas the International Day for Disaster Reduction, held every 13 October, celebrates how people and communities around the world are reducing their exposure to disasters and raising awareness about the importance of reining in the risks that they face. And whereas whether flooding, landslides, tidal waves, storm surges, fires, drought, hurricanes, or storms are threatening, forests have a role to play in the protection of lives and the economy. And whereas allowing natural forests to remain intact is a cost-effective investment as well as a life-saving investment. And whereas the biomass industry is having impacts on southern forests and community resiliency following natural disasters, as southern forests are increasingly being exported overseas to provide electricity in the European Union because of the present renewable energy policy. And whereas October 12th is the International Day of Natural Disaster Reduction, an opportune time to stand for forests, and whereas through this resolution, the board has the opportunity to demonstrate support of native forests as a key part of the puzzle for natural disaster reduction. Now therefore be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors, as local political leaders in the southern United States, joins with other elected and local officials on this International Day for Natural Disaster Reduction in recognition and support of the important role that forests play in reducing vulnerability to natural disasters, in understanding that one of the best ways to protect the communities we represent is by supporting the conservation of our standing forests and improving management practice in our working forests, and in urging thoughtful consideration of the existing and proposed energy policies toward capping the overall use of biomass in line with available supply relative to logging of native forests. So I motion to approve.
Any comments or question? Call a question.
Seven yes.
Thank you. No further report.
Mr. Ross?
So I'd like to jump on what Mr. Benton said about our grass and the medians too. I think if they fall outside of our own ordinance, VDOT should mow the medians. I know many times on Route 3 it's beyond that. I also had a comment from a constituent this week about on the sidewalks over by the new grocery store where Harrison drops in Lytle. Apparently there's wood that's covering the sidewalks from trees or bushes that have overgrown that area. So I'm not sure if VDOT would cover that or who would, the sidewalks, Ed. Is that? If sidewalk, so in other words, you couldn't walk or ride a bike on the sidewalks without getting hit by bushes or running over a bunch of debris.
I'll take a look at that,
Okay.
Mr. Ross.
Is that something the county would do, or would it be the person that owns the property?
Yeah, because I dealt with something similar on Heatherstone Drive. And what it is VDOT will clear it if need be, but they'll clear it by taking down any trees or anything that are obstructing it. So if the property owner wants to keep those trees, then the property owner needs to trim them back so that the...
I don't think it's more like big undergrowth
Okay.
bushes that have kind of...
It depends on whether or not it's in the VDOT
VDOT
right away
or not.
That's why I'll have to
You
look
check
at
that
it,
out.
Mr.
That'd be
Ross.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. The other thing is Mr. Cole sent out an email informing us that our next meeting in November happens to fall on Election Day. So I personally think, to be transparent with the public, we should not meet on that day. I think in the past we moved that meeting to Thursday. So I don't know if there wants to be any discussion, but I'll make a motion that we move our first meeting in November off Election Day into the following Thursday.
Any comments, question?
I'm not sure if we have to do that tonight, or can we do it next?
The sooner you do it, the better, so we can provide notice.
Following Thursday.
We're good? Is that a motion?
That was a motion.
We need a motion? All right. Call the question.
Yeah, I understand that to be Thursday the 10th.
All right. Next thing I have is I would like on the agenda in
Seven
November
yes.
at this meeting that we would look at some options of ongoing funding for use to cover this $124,000 gap with the libraries. The staff would come up with some options. If there's no options that we could use, then that's the case, but I'd like some options if possible. And last thing I have is, as I'm sitting here, when we're talking about some questions that we've asked, some supervisors have asked of the schools, I kind of felt bad. I'm like feeling guilty. I thought, why should I feel guilty? I mean, we're asking questions about a budget. I wish the school board had taxing authority, but they don't. We do, and we are the ones that set the budget. And with that, we should be able to ask questions. Each one of us up here represents 1/7 of the population of taxpayers of Spotsylvania County. In that sense, when we ask a question, we are not asking it as an individual, but as a representative of our constituents, and I think we need an answer. And I don't know the best way to do that, but I should not be ashamed or feel bad that I'm asking questions that whether they're reasonable or not, they're questions, and we shouldn't feel bad about asking them. As a matter of fact, we should ask them not just at budget time, but the entire year. So, Mark, I don't know how you want to handle that. I have talked to school board members about this. I still don't have answers to the questions I've asked. It hasn't been that long, maybe a month, but I don't think they're very hard. I'd be happy to share them publicly of what I'm asking. I'm not sure how to go forward with that, but I guess, as Mr. McLaughlin said, I'll continue to ask you for those and get a response, because you work for us collectively. The school board doesn't. They're their own entity, but we do provide funding. It is a big funding line in our budget. It's over half of our budget that goes to the schools. So just in due diligence, we should be able to ask those questions. Thank you.
Okay. Just a quick one, Tom. I'm getting a lot of questions about Lidl since you brought it up. Do we have any idea when that store is going to open, or if you could find out?
I don't have a specific date. I know that they are experimenting with the store and in some cases removing things that were initially constructed because they've decided that the layout that they started with was not adequate. So they're actually taking parts of the floor and walls and other things out. I'll get an answer and get that back to everyone. Okay.
Just getting a lot of questions about it. Thanks. That's all I have.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Sabula?
I would just like to make a clarifying statement on the questions from the board or questions from individual board members. And it's just that. Questions from the board means that it's a question that all of us asked or that we voted upon. And a question from an individual board member can go to anyone at any time, but they should not be construed as from the board as a whole. That's a distinction that I was trying to make earlier on.
Mr. Ross?
I'll just say that during the budget season, each one of us asks questions, and they're not from the board as a whole either. Whatever questions we ask, it's from each one of us, and it goes from the board. So I'm not sure if we're splitting straws here or what we're doing, but a question is a question.
Okay. Mr. Taylor, is there anything?
Thank you for those notes, and this brings us to closed session, for which we have several items.
This will be your resolution to adjourn into closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose or the disposition of publicly held real property, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, specifically discussion of real property in the Lee Hill District. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry, where no previous announcement has been made of the business's or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community, specifically relating to a food processing business, a machine manufacturing business, a retail support products manufacturing business, and defense contractors. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn in a closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, and consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters, specifically Walgreen Company v. County of Spotsylvania, Virginia, case numbers CL 13001151 and CL 15000723, and whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.23711A 3, 5, and 7 such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters.
So moved.
Call the question.
Seven yes.
Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors has convened a closed meeting on this day pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.23712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors hereby returns to open meeting and certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convened in closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Mr. Skinner?
Aye.
Mr. Benton?
Aye.
Mr. Trampy?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Mrs. Zabula?
Aye.
Mr. Jakubowski?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to read a motion. I move that the board authorizes the county attorney's office and appointed counsel, outside counsel, on the matter of Walgreens Company v. Spotsylvania County, matter numbers CL13-1151 and CL15-723, to provide legal representation to the members of the Board of Equalization in their official capacity as members of the Board of Equalization should the Spotsylvania Circuit Court allow opposing counsel in those matters to depose the members of the Board of Equalization, which the Board of Supervisors believes is improper and is moving against through counsel.
That motion? Call the question.
Seven yes.
Thank you.
That is your agenda, Mr. Chairman. The board's next work session is October 25th at 6 p.m.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Call the
Adjourn.
question.